So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time within 30 minutes. Now just watching this lecture would be job half done because just after watching it, you need to revise it as well because revision helps in consolidating these current affairs in your memory. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. Now you can revise these current affairs from the notes provided by us, and these notes shall be shared on our Telegram channel. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section just below this video. Alright then, let's begin today's session. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. Okay? So daily current affairs, we'll be covering 5th of July 2025, Saturday's current affairs in this lecture. Okay? And here's the list of topics. Number 1 on this list is variable rate reverse repo auctions. Okay? Recently, RBI conducted VRRR options, VRRR auctions, to absorb surplus liquidity in our banking system. Now, what is this entire issue? We'll talk about this. Then, we'll talk about PM-POSHAN Scheme. Okay, it is a centrally sponsored scheme of Government of India. So, what are the objectives of PM-POSHAN Scheme? How important it is? We'll talk about this. Then, recently, WHO, World Health Organization, has launched 3x35 initiative. Basically, the aim of this initiative is to reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases in the world. So what is this 3x35 initiative? We'll talk about this. Then recently it was announced that Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla would talk to students so as to motivate them from International Space Station. Now the radio communication that Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla would use to communicate with students is called ham radio communication. So what is this ham radio communication? We'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about Rampa rebellion and its leader, Alluri Sitaram Raju, who led the Rampa rebellion against the British. Okay, so we'll talk about these 5 issues. All right, so let's straight away jump into the lecture, starting with topic number 1, and that is VRRR auctions, which stands for variable rate reverse repo auctions. Now hear me out carefully, okay? You must have heard about repo rate and you must have also heard about reverse repo rate. Now repo rate is the interest rate at which RBI gives loans to banks, okay? That is repo rate. But sometimes banks have surplus money with them and they don't know where to lend it, okay? Sometimes banks are sitting on a pile of cash and they are not able to loan it out to anyone. They are unable to find customers. Now, to help these banks to earn interest on this pile of cash, RBI tells them that you loan it out to us for a certain period of time and earn interest on it. You see, it is a loss-making thing for banks. If banks are sitting on a pile of cash and they are unable to loan it out, they are making a loss. Why? Because if they were able to loan it out, they would have earned an interest on it. But now they are not earning any interest, right? Therefore, RBI tells them that give it to me, give this money to me as a loan for a specific period like 7-day period, 14-day period, 28 days and earn some interest on it temporarily. Clear? Now, the interest rate at which RBI borrows from banks is known as reverse repo rate. So, repo rate is the interest rate at which banks borrow from RBI. And reverse repo rate is the interest rate at which RBI borrows from banks. Okay. Now, generally, reverse repo rate is used for helping banks so that they can lend or loan out their idle cash. But sometimes RBI employs reverse repo or borrowings through reverse repo to reduce the amount of liquidity or cash in the banking system. Okay, now RBI does it for various purposes. We'll talk about those purposes. But when RBI wants that banks should have less liquidity, then RBI uses reverse repo rate. Clear? So it borrows from banks at reverse repo rate. Now, you understand reverse repo rate, you understand repo rate. Now, what is this variable rate reverse repo auctions? Let's talk about this. Okay, so VRRR auctions. Look, you understand repo. Repo is basically when RBI loans money to commercial banks. Okay, and reverse repo is basically when banks loan money to RBI. Now look, repo rate and reverse repo rate are fixed. For example, for the sake of this lecture or for the sake of this example, for common understanding, let's suppose reverse repo rate is 3.5% and repo rate is 4%. Okay, so that means RBI is loaning out money to banks at 4% and banks are loaning out money to RBI at 3.5%. This is what we mean by reverse repo. Okay, and repo, right? Now, what is variable rate reverse repo? Sometimes banks are not happy with this interest rate. Banks say that this is a very low interest rate. 3.5% is very low. Okay, we are not satisfied with this. So RBI basically invites auctions. Okay, RBI says to all banks that do bidding. You have seen an auction, right? People bid in auctions. So similarly, RBI conducts these reverse repo auctions and asks banks to bid. Okay. Now, when banks bid, okay, the banks that offer a higher interest rate, a lower interest rate, well, RBI gives them the bid. You understand this, right? You know what auctions are. Suppose you want to buy a piece of land and that is being auctioned. So the person who gives the highest bid gets that piece of land, gets the opportunity to buy it. Similarly, in reverse repo also, what RBI does is asks banks to bid, and the banks that offer the lowest interest rate, okay, they generally win the bid and RBI takes money from them and gives them the interest rate. Okay, but because it is the interest rate on these loans is decided through bidding, that is why it is known as variable. This V stands for variable, because reverse repo rate is fixed, but these auctions basically allow banks to decide their own rate. Okay, the banks bid for these rates. That is why these rates are variable and they are generally higher than reverse repo rate, the fixed one, and less than repo rate. Nonetheless, the interest rate is not decided beforehand. It depends on the biddings made by banks. Clear? Makes sense? Now, about these VRR auctions, so let's talk about some of its features. So, recently RBI conducted these VRR auctions. Now, RBI under these VRRR auctions, VRRR auctions, RBI borrows from banks for fixed period. Sometimes 7-day period, 14-day period, 28-day period loan. Okay. This is done by RBI to absorb surplus liquidity. If banks have surplus money, RBI absorbs that surplus money. Clear? Now, interest rate is not fixed but decided through bidding. We have discussed this. And what is the basic purpose behind this? The thing is that if banks are going to give out their surplus money to RBI, banks would be left with less money. They would be left with less money to loan out. This would lead to lower credit creation in the economy, because now banks have less money to give loans out to people. So there is less credit creation in the economy. Plus, the thing is that because banks are giving out their funds to RBI, now when customers go to banks for loans, banks basically charge a higher interest rate, because banks think that, well, I can give it to RBI also. I can give this loan to RBI, and loans to RBI are secure. RBI will never default, right? So customers have to say that I am willing to pay you a higher interest rate. Please give me this loan. So basically, long story cut short, I will explain this entire mechanism in our economics lectures. Okay, but long story cut short, just remember this, that through these VRRR auctions, short-term interest rates in the market rise. Because short-term interest rates in the market loans rise, well, credit creation also declines. Now, less people are taking loans. Less people are taking loans, therefore, there is less money in the economy, there is less demand in the economy. And when demand declines, supply is there, demand declines, then inflation also falls down. So this step taken by RBI would also reduce inflation. Okay. Now, if you are done with your economics lectures, well, this is a very easy thing for you to understand. If you are a beginner, if you're not done with your economics lectures, well, be patient. When we'll cover economics in our Gurukul course, you will understand. Okay? So, for now, all these beginners who have started with current affairs and have not covered economics, well, just remember this. Through these VRRR auctions, basically the interest rates in the market on all the loans would rise. This would basically disincentivize people to take more loans. So, less number of loans would be taken by people in India. That would reduce demand because there would be less money, and that would push down inflation. Make sense? Right? So, this is the impact. First of all, the biggest impact is, well, liquidity declines. So, these VRRR auctions, liquidity declines, credit creation, this declines, demand declines, aggregate demand, inflation declines, okay, and short term interest rates, they rise up. This is the impact, and this is the reason why RBI conducted these auctions. Simple, okay? Let's move forward to next news item, which is PM-POSHAN Abhiyan. Okay. Now, hear me out carefully, okay? You need to understand the background of this entire scheme, then only you will understand PM-POSHAN scheme. See, the thing is that in India, many children, because of their poor background, they are not provided with adequate food security. They are not provided with adequate nutritional security, right? Because of so much poverty, well, parents also send their kids to work because there is so much poverty. Right? Parents send their kids to work. That is why these kids don't go to schools. Yes. So, education levels are going down because children are not studying in schools. Plus, because of extreme poverty, nutritional standards or nutritional security or food security standards of these families, it is also declining. So, people in India, and I shouldn't say people, kids in India, children in India are suffering from food security. Plus, they are also suffering from lack of education. So, to solve for this problem, what did the government do? Well, the government said that in all the government schools, we are providing free education, free and compulsory education. You should know this. As per Right to Education Act, every child in India is entitled to free and compulsory education till the age of 14 years. So, every child is eligible to be enrolled in a government school if he cannot afford private schools. Make sense? Now, the reason why parents were not sending their kids to school was because, well, they were extremely poor, those households were extremely poor, and they decided to send their kids to work so that these kids would earn enough money to fund their own food, right? So the government started with midday meal scheme. Now, what is midday meal scheme? In all these eligible schools, government will provide hot cooked meals with full nutrients to these children who are going to school. Now, what happens? First of all these children from poor backgrounds who are studying in government schools, well, they would get hot cooked nutritional food, okay, full of nutrients. So their food security problem gets solved, their nutritional security problem gets solved, right? Plus, now parents would be willing to send them to schools because they know that they are getting free food in these schools. So in the hope for securing free food, free lunch for their children, parents are willing to send their kids to school. And these poor parents are also willing to send girls also to school. So this improves girl education as well, right? So this is a win-win situation. So government launched midday meal scheme. Under midday meal scheme, lunch would be provided free of cost, full of nutrients. This led to, well, improvement in nutritional standards of children. This also led to improvement in enrollment in schools. Now more and more parents were willing to send their kids to school. So education levels were also going up, enrollment ratios also went up. This was the advantage of midday meal scheme. Now this midday meal scheme was re-christened. There were some changes made to this midday meal scheme and it was relaunched as PM-POSHAN Scheme. Okay, Poshan, as you know, in Hindi means nutrition, right? So PM-POSHAN Scheme. Clear, it was launched in 2021. It is a relaunched version of midday meal scheme only. Clear? So let's talk about this PM-POSHAN Scheme. Alright, you understood the background? Now let's talk about it. So PM-POSHAN Scheme. So what are the key features of this PM-POSHAN Scheme? Nutritional support to children, okay, hot cooked meals to children from primary to class 8th. So students studying in primary school to class 8th, okay, students studying in these standards of eligible schools, mostly government schools, okay. All the eligible schools would get hot cooked meal per student from primary standard, class 1 basically, or KG, kindergarten, to class 8. Okay. Now this scheme is centrally sponsored scheme. Now what do you mean by a centrally sponsored scheme? A centrally sponsored scheme is that scheme which is launched by a central government of India. Okay. But it is implemented by state government. Plus, the money for this scheme, the funding for this scheme is shared between center and states. Central government spends 60% and state government spends 40%. That is the case with normal states, okay. For northeastern states, the ratio can go to 90-10 as well. But centrally sponsored scheme, there are two types of central government schemes. One is central sector. This is 100% financed by central government. But centrally sponsored, the funding is shared between center and states, okay. So PM-POSHAN Scheme is centrally sponsored. There is universal coverage. That means every child belonging to any caste, any creed, any gender, every child in these eligible schools is eligible for this hot cooked meal, okay. It is not that only certain background of students would be eligible for this. All students are eligible for this for eligible schools, okay. Now this addresses nutritional security. We have talked about this, but it also improves school attendance and retention. So school enrollment improves, education improves, more and more kids are coming to school and their nutritional levels are also improving. So this is basically a win-win situation. Basically it is a scheme which fulfills two objectives: education, nutritional security, right? So that's the point, okay. Now this scheme, PM-POSHAN Scheme, is suffering from various issues also, some challenges also, okay. What are those challenges? First of all, funding for this scheme gets delayed at times, which leads to poor implementation of this scheme in certain states. So this is one problem. Then there is less money allocated per child, less funding per child. So that leads to poor quality of meals. So more money should be allocated per child. Okay, this is a problem. Then it follows one size fits all. Basically, if a meal is decided, for example, children would get this in their midday meal, that is implemented across India. Now that is a problem because different regions of India have different dietary habits. Some prefer fish rice, some are vegetarians, some are non-vegetarians, right? So this scheme should be catering to local requirements. That should be the case, okay? We shouldn't follow one size fits all. And then there are infrastructure gaps. There are some poor infrastructure quality. There is some poor infrastructure problems, okay? Or there are some infrastructure problems in some areas. Food is not getting delivered on time. There are these logistics issues. Now, to solve for some of these issues, government has basically made some changes to the scheme. What are those changes? First of all, government increased budget per student. So this was done. Then, government advocated vocal for local. This vocal for local movement means that local crops, local dietary habits should be encouraged in that particular area. So that solves this problem of one size fits all, right? So this is done. Then what government is doing is, this is very fascinating because it would also improve child education. Well, government is encouraging schools to have nutritional gardens in their backyards where children will help teachers and experts to grow crops themselves, to grow vegetables themselves. So in their school gardens, they would grow crops, This would give them more information about these crops. They would also know the value of hard work. What kind of work needs to be put in to grow these crops. So they would value that food also. So this experiment is also being conducted and it's working, right? Nutritional gardens. Children are growing crops in their backyards as a part of their extracurricular activities. Okay, and nutritional experts have been hired by government to basically advise the government on the kind of meals that are being provided to people, kids. Okay, so these changes have been made, though some changes are more like some changes are still required because there are gaps or problems that still persist. But these changes have really addressed some of the previous challenges. So these are good changes, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Now let's move forward to third news item, and which is WHO's 3x35 initiative. Okay, hear me out carefully. You see, the thing is that there are two types of diseases, two categories of diseases: communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases. Now, communicable diseases are those diseases that are caused by microorganisms. Though these are infectious diseases caused by bacteria, virus, fungi, protozoa, all the other microorganisms. So diseases caused by infection are called communicable diseases because they are communicable. I can transmit that disease to you. But there are various other health problems or health challenges or diseases that are non-communicable. That means they're not caused by virus, bacteria. They are caused by poor lifestyle choices, or they are caused by genetic problems. For example, diabetes. It is not caused by any virus or bacteria. Heart attack, hypertension, high BP, okay, organ failure. There are so many different types of diseases that are not caused by organisms, microorganisms. These diseases are caused by sometimes because of your genetic makeup or because of your lifestyle choices, right? Now, these diseases are known as non-communicable diseases. Now, WHO says that, well, earlier, many years back, the burden of communicable diseases was quite high as compared to non-communicable diseases. But slowly and gradually, non-communicable diseases grew. And today, well, non-communicable diseases have a higher, way higher burden than communicable diseases. WHO says that more than these infectious diseases, the bigger challenge is non-communicable diseases. Okay? Now, WHO also found out that there are a few problems. You see, there are certain problems, there are certain lifestyle choices that humans have employed, because of which non-communicable disease burden is rising. There are three things that human beings are consuming, and because of this, health problems are rising. Number one thing is smoking, cigarettes. Number two is alcohol consumption. And number three is sugary drinks like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dew, sugary drinks. These three items have increased the burden of non-communicable diseases manifold. Therefore, WHO wants to reduce their consumption so that more and more people are healthy. Clear? Simple. So what WHO has said is, WHO says that by 2035, in another 10 years, all the countries in the world would increase the price of these three items: cigarettes, alcohol, and sugary drinks, okay, by 50%. So all countries of the world should resolve or should make this promise that they would increase the price of these three things, three bad things, by 50% in the next 10 years. And how would these countries raise the price of these three things? By levying more taxes. So if you put more taxes on these three items, they would become more expensive, right? Now, these are three things and their prices should be increased by 2035. That is why it is called 3x35 initiative. You understand the point? So let's take a look at this, okay? So WHO's 3x35 initiative. So by 2035, these three things, which is cigarettes, alcohol, and number three is sugary drinks. Okay, their prices should be increased by 50%. And how would you increase their prices? By levying more taxes. So state governments should levy, all the different countries should levy more taxes. Now, what would be the benefit of this? First of all, if these things would become more expensive, well, less people would consume it. Right? So there would be less consumption of these things. Along with awareness campaigns, more and more people would be persuaded to consume less of these things, right? So less consumption. Now, when you will consume less of these three things, well, that would improve your health. So this would reduce non-communicable disease burden, right? This would get reduced. When this would get reduced, well, healthcare costs would also come down, which the governments have to spend for the health of people. Healthcare costs would come down, right? This would be done. Plus, WHO says that by making these things expensive by levying more taxes, because the government would be levying more taxes, so government would be earning more money through taxes, right? Government would be earning more money through taxes because they're levying more taxes. So WHO says that governments all over the world can earn up to $1 trillion of additional tax revenue. So governments would be able to earn additional revenue, and this additional revenue can be used to in achievement of sustainable development goals. So more money with governments, so that governments can spend that money for sustainable development goals. People's health would also improve. This is what 3x35 initiative is. Simple. Clear? Make sense? Alright. Now let's quickly shift our focus to next news item, and that is ham radio communication. Now hear me out carefully, okay? Very simple. Now ham radio is basically a very simple yet alternative type of communication device, okay? Now this communication device requires an antenna and a transceiver. A transceiver is an instrument that has a transmitter and a receiver also. So an antenna that would throw your signals, and transmitter and receiver, okay? So what happens is, let's suppose you and I want to communicate, but not through this lecture or not through this YouTube medium. You and I want to communicate through radio communication, okay? So what will happen is, you will have a transceiver, I will have a transceiver, you will have an antenna, I will have an antenna, okay? And we will communicate on a separate radio frequency. So we will be using radio waves to communicate. So whatever I'll be saying would reach you through radio frequencies. Now those radio frequencies have been kept separate for this particular type of communication, which is known as ham communication, okay? Generally, communication happens through radio waves, but those are different frequencies that are used. Ham radio or alternative radio, basically, this is basically used for emergency purposes or interacting with students and all that. So this is a type of radio communication that is mostly used for disasters, emergencies, and sometimes it is used by astronauts to talk to students, educational institutions, for like charitable purposes, okay? Now this ham communication is being used currently by Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla. You know about him, he is on Axiom 4 mission, right? So it is being used by him to talk to students in India, so as to basically motivate them to choose astrophysics, astrospace, all these things, okay? So to motivate students, he is talking to educational institutions using ham radio, okay? So this is about ham radio. Now some extra information, some brief points about ham radio, okay? Some trivia related things, okay? Some basic trivia about ham radio is given in your notes, so just go through that. All right, we won't spend that much time on this. And we'll quickly jump to, well, fifth news item, which is Alluri Sitaram Raju, okay? Now 4th of July marked the 128th birth anniversary of Alluri Sitaram Raju. Now Alluri Sitaram Raju was basically a freedom fighter in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, he fought against the British, he led many revolts, and the most famous revolt was the Rampa rebellion, okay, which was between 1922 to 1924, around this time, okay. So, well, 4th of July is his birth anniversary, it is celebrated every year, but this time around, central government, in fact, Union Defence Minister, paid homage and paid tributes to this brave hero of ours, okay. So that is why this news event or this birth anniversary became significant this time around, because the entire country is celebrating it, not just Andhra Pradesh. Make sense? So this is Alluri Sitaram Raju. So you need to remember a few things about him. First of all, well, he led Rampa rebellion, okay, from 1922 to 24. Though he was not a tribal himself, but he championed the cause of tribal. So he led many tribal revolts also. In fact, Rampa rebellion was a kind of tribal revolts also, their forest rights and all that. He was not a tribal himself, but he was their leader. He championed their cause. Okay. The thing about Alluri Sitaram Raju was that he was inspired by Gandhi and his non-cooperation movement. And you know the period of non-cooperation movement, right? It was up to 1922 when the famous, infamous, I should say, Chauri Chaura incident happened and Mahatma Gandhi decided to call off non-cooperation movement. Now, some of his supporters got angry because of that and they continued their own struggle. Alluri Sitaram Raju was one such person. He said that peaceful methods won't work against the British, so we have to pick up arms. And he led a rebellion, Rampa rebellion. Clear? Now, when was he born? Okay, what are some of his highlights? What is his contribution towards India's freedom struggle? And how is he celebrated in Andhra Pradesh? Okay, all of these things are given in your notes. So just go through that as well. Okay, here he is, Alluri Sitaram Raju. Make sense? You see, because modern history is part of your syllabus and tribal revolts are also part of your modern history syllabus. You can take a look at that, okay? When you look at your UPSC syllabus, you will see that in the GS1 section, tribal revolts are part of your modern history syllabus, okay? So make sure that you cover all the major tribal revolts, and the tribal revolts that are covered in current affairs become all the more important for you to cover, okay? Though you will cover a lot of tribal revolts in your modern history classes, but those tribal revolts that are covered in the news, like this one, Rampa rebellion, well, you need to remember it, alright? Okay. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'm sure it has added value to your preparation, but it will add more value if you're consistent and regular with this lecture series. So please do not forget to watch this lecture series regularly. And also, please do not forget to revise this lecture from the notes that are provided on our Telegram channel. Revision is very important. Otherwise, you'll forget these current affairs in a matter of couple of days. So please, and I'll say please one more time, do not forget to revise these current affairs from the notes. On that note, I'll be signing off with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.